Filipinos are taking the law into their own hands, literally gathering millions of signatures in an effort to end a pork barrel system of government funding. President Benigno Aquino is being pressured to support the bill, but his corruption-fighting issues run deep. Good evening, everyone. I'm Timothy Go. A grassroots campaign got underway in the Philippines this month to force political reform, where institutional efforts have fallen short. A People's Initiative bill seeks to prohibit and criminalize lump sum discretionary funds once and for all. These have been the source of protests and controversy since businesswoman Janet Napoles, along with politicians and officials, were charged with offenses relating to the misuse and plunder of $250 million. The Supreme Court has ruled two of the so-called pork barrel funds unconstitutional, but President Benigno Aquino is seeking to have those reviewed. Well, the funds are not tied to specific projects, but are allocated by politicians at their discretion, leaving them vulnerable to corruption. The People's Bill itself needs 6 million verified signatures, which could be a complicated process, but it is gaining traction thanks in part to a pushback from the Aquino government. The president, who came to office on a platform of fighting corruption, now faces allegations he is stalling the reforms that have in the past rallied his support. To discuss these issues with me now are Maria Gracia Pulido-Tan, chairperson of the Philippine Commission on Audit, the authority responsible for public accountability in the Philippines, and People's Rights campaigner Renato Reyes from the advocacy group Bayan. Thank you very much for joining us. Maria, let's begin with you. In the recently passed 2015 budget, the president claims there is no pork barrel funds provided in this budget. The opposition says there is. So what would be your interpretation of the lump sum that still exists in that in the 2015 budget?
Just to set the record, the 2015 budget has not been passed. It is going through deliberations by the Congress. And insofar as the so-called, what the alleged lump sum appropriations are, I will not comment on that because it's an independent body. We do not audit the budget, but we audit the spending out of the appropriation. So I would rather leave that commentary to others, but not my office.
Okay, Maria, just to follow up on this, are you satisfied that the system is protected against the misuse of public money in the government?
Yes, appropriately. I think in terms of legal framework, legal provisions and all of that, yes, we do have adequate, more than adequate protection. I think the problem, as in most cases, is always in the implementation, because not too many or not everyone actually faithfully observe the rules, the regulations, the laws, and other requirements.
All right, Mr. Reyes, the Supreme Court earlier ruled that the PDAF and the DAP, or the Priority Development Assistance Funds for our viewers out in the region, and the Development Acceleration Program, both funds, of course, the center of this alleged misuse. Now, the Supreme Court has ruled them unconstitutional. Is there really still a need for this People's Initiative of 6 million signatures just to get rid of these two systems?
Well, from what we are seeing, the Aquino government is doing everything it can to actually circumvent the rulings of the Supreme Court. So while the Supreme Court has outlawed congressional pork barrel, they have found creative and informal ways of maintaining the pork barrel system for lawmakers. Meanwhile, the president has also sought ways to institutionalize presidential pork. So given all these conditions, despite our victories before the Supreme Court, it's quite clear for us that the Aquino government and the Congress that it controls does not have any intention of totally abolishing the corrupt pork barrel system. So now it falls on the people. What will the people do? They can actually enact a law which would abolish and ban and criminalize all forms of pork barrel spending.
Grace, what do you think of this? Do you think there is such a need for a People's Initiative to make these pork barrel spending go away for good?
I think that more than enacting a law, as I think that we have already sufficient laws in place, and the decision of the Supreme Court is in itself law because it's now part of our jurisprudence, and everybody is just enjoined to obey it. So again, I go back to implementation and what the people can do, and I think that's what I would like to see, is for them to be really and truly and forever be vigilant to make sure that that everything is observed. But to go out and enact a law, as Mr. Reyes has put it, I really don't know.
All right, Mr. Reyes, previous administrations have a similar system of using government savings for development purposes. So why is this becoming a problem only now?
Well, people have been awoke into the realities of pork barrel and corruption. After the Napolis scam was exposed, people tried to understand the pork barrel system better, and they came up all the way to the presidential pork barrel. So even the presidential pork barrel funds under the sole discretion of the president have also been subjected to corruption. And this is where institutions have failed. No? Not many people have been prosecuted. How many lawmakers have actually been prosecuted? Very few. So with all these happening, part of public vigilance is actually trying to see what kind of intervention we can do to counter these corrupt practices in government. It's quite clear that the laws are not enough, the mechanisms are not enough, even the commission and audit efforts are not enough. No? So what do you do when the president himself is hell-bent on circumventing the laws and the rulings of the Supreme Court? So this is our way of fighting back, but it's not simply focused on just gathering 6 million signatures. We also want to educate people and make them more involved in monitoring cases of corruption and seeking accountability in government.
Okay, so these funds, which are for economic development, very similar to the U.S. earmark system in the U.S. Congress, in the U.S., they can sort of make it work, make the accountability of spending these money work. But why can't the Philippines do the same? Maria, why don't you address this issue?
Perhaps I should refer to the Supreme Court decision, the very reason why the Supreme Court declared the PDAF, or the pork barrel system, unconstitutional, is because it has been shown that even after the enactment of the law, the legislators continued to intervene in the spending. So in our system of government, the role of Congress and the executive are quite very clearly delineated. Congress appropriates and the executive spends. But with what happened in the Philippines, and this was borne out by, among other things, our special audit on the pork barrel system, was that even after the enactment of the law, so post-enactment, there was still intervention by legislators.
Mr.
So I think that was the very reason why. And so I go, and that's why I think that really the people's vigilance here is very, very important. And if I may add, also, the maturity of the Filipino voters, because legislators are voted in office, and I think that we can do a lot in addressing the problems or the concerns with the pork barrel, because as you said, the system in itself is not bad, but it was the way that it was being carried out. And if we if we exercise our right of suffrage responsibly and judiciously, then perhaps we will see less of this intervention from the legislature in the pork barrel system. If it will again be brought back into the system.
All right, Mr. Reyes, instead of abolishing the entire system, can't we put in more accountability instead from the people using the development funds? Is that realistic to ask for in a system like the one we have in the Philippines?
Well, you can't really save a very rotten system, a very corrupt system. You have to understand it in the Philippines. Our politicians, the lawmakers, the mayors, even the senators, all the way up to the presidency, these are all affected in one way or another by political dynasties. They belong to certain families. They represent certain vested interest groups, narrow interest groups, if I may add. So how can you expect these types of politicians to actually abide by the law and not dip their hands into public funds? There's no way of saving this kind of corrupt system because it only breeds patronage politics, and that's something that we have to totally reject because it's one of the bases for wholesale corruption in government.
Okay, if that's the case, then if the Philippine president wants to eradicate corruption once and for all, why is he still against the efforts of cleaning up the pork barrel system? Grace, you wanna answer this?
I don't know where that's coming from, but as far as I know and as far as I can see, the president is very serious about cleaning up, and I'm not really sure about whether or not he wants the pork barrel back, because it's right now there is noise that the pork barrel is back in the 2015 proposed budget, but as I said, it's a point of view at this point in time. I am not in a position, as I said in the beginning, to make a comment because we do not audit the budget, and I'm here speaking as the head of agency of the Commission on Audit. Our role is in the budget execution stage. So, but it has to be shown. I mean, it has to be. That's why there are hearings in Congress, and I think that that every Filipino who really believes that there is pork barrel in the budget proposal now should really go to Congress and show and convince all the legislators there that yes, there is. But if there's none, then perhaps. That's not a point of contention at this time.
Mr. Reyes, your thoughts on that?
There's no point in convincing congressmen to junk the pork barrel system because the congressmen themselves
they are benefiting from the system.
They all benefit from the rotten system. So it's clearly pointless to lobby Congress or even lobby the president or Malacanang because they're all into it. They're all benefiting from this corrupt system of patronage. That's why the people either have to go to the courts or they have to go to the streets or have to pass their own bill. That's how we see it right now. It's an indictment of government. It highlights the failure of government to really uphold the interests of the people.
All right. Speaking on that note, with the court, we'll have to take a break. Thank you very much, Renato Reyes, for joining us. We'll take a break, and when we return, Maria will be with us and another electoral reform expert coming up in just a moment. The pork barrel scam is particularly grating on President Aquino, who came to office on a platform of fighting corruption. The issue has exposed him to allegations he's keeping elements of the pork barrel system for his own political ends. He has now spoken of clipping the powers of the Supreme Court in retaliation for its ruling against his disbursement acceleration program, and he's also hinted he is open to changing the Constitution to extend his time in office. All issues cited in a New York Times editorial recently that accused him of political mischief. And to discuss these issues of governance and reform with us tonight, still with us, Maria Gracia-Tan, chairperson of the Philippine Commission on Audit, and Ramon Casiple, executive director of the Institute of Political and Electoral Reform. Let's begin with you, Mr. Casiple. Do you agree with the New York Times editorial accusing the president of political mischief?
Well, not exactly political mischief. Maybe it's a question of point of view. The president, I think, is trying to protect his privileges and authority. And in the process, I think he made unwise moves or pronouncement, such as changing the Constitution or of trying to seek a second term or trying to change the authority of the Supreme Court.
So by thinking out loud on these issues, did he make a big mistake then at that time when he talked about clipping the powers of the Supreme Court, for example?
Well, insofar as an opinion, I think he made a mistake there, but I haven't seen him make a move to follow this up. So far, what we got from him are his opinions and pronouncements.
Okay, Maria, your authority is, as you mentioned earlier, to audit the spending. If, for example, you see anomalies in the presidential pork, for example, would you be able to find the president liable for this?
Oh, every year we audit all government funds, including the spending by the Office of the President, his spending of what is called the Presidential Social Fund, and which is usually referred to as the Presidential Pork Barrel, although it's not really in the nature of a pork barrel, just like what the legislators used to have. We audit that every year regularly, and our reports are posted on our website. They come out also annually. So it's not as if we don't audit these things. We do.
All right. So, but if you find, let's just say you find anomalies in the presidential spending, who has jurisdiction to rule on that?
Our jurisdiction or our responsibility is to issue notices of disallowance if we find an expenditure or a disbursement of public money to be irregular, and we do that. And no matter who may be liable, it could be the president, it could be the chief justice, it could be the Senate president, it could be the Speaker of the House. I mean, it doesn't matter to us. It's just work. And if it is something that we find and it is substantiated by the records, we will go for it.
Even if
There's
you're an
no problem
independent
about
body
that. Yes.
appointed by the presidential office?
Anyone, yes. For example, in the special audit on the PIDA, we have issued thousands of notices of disallowance, even against the legislators themselves.
Okay. Mr. Casiple, going back to the president thinking out loud about clipping the powers of the Supreme Court, out of the justices there, he's appointed about 5 on his side. Is this the reason why you think he wants to reduce the power of the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be an equal part of the 3 branches of government?
Well, I think the mere fact that there was a Supreme Court decision which clipped his own powers, you can't expect him to, to be bad about it. And I think there is that reaction to clip in his turn the powers of the Supreme Court, and that includes his own appointees. In fact, I think he must be mad at his appointees for not following or not expecting to follow what he thinks should be the position.
Okay, but of course we know the Supreme Court is an independent body, regardless of who appoints the justices there. He is now saying that this is judicial overreach. Do you agree?
Well, I don't think so, because we're talking here of a Supreme Court decision on matters that it is within its authority given by the Constitution. So how can that be an overreach? The power to review anything, act or law or any executive action is certainly within the province of the Supreme Court.
In his recent speech, he alluded to the fact that he may and can impeach justices if he wants to, if they continue to butt heads with the executive branch of the government. What do you think about that?
Well, of course, theoretically, he has that authority or power together with Congress,
which he has done before.
Which he has done before. But remember, impeachment is a political initiative, and that certainly would include the people themselves. In the past, there have been attempts to impeach justices, but there were times when the people themselves went against the decision, and the president, former president Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, had to step back. In this case, I don't think the president will get the support of the people.
Okay, speaking of that, the whole notion of changing the Constitution and amending the Constitution, the Constitution is a very sacred thing for Filipinos. What do you think is the president's intention of even entertaining the thought of charter change?
Well, if you're thinking of the judicial overreach accusation, the only way that the president can address the whole thing is by changing the constitution, because it's a provision in the constitution, particularly the newer provision for judicial review of the conducts of both the legislative and the executive in terms of appropriateness of the under the Constitution.
Okay, but if he had left it with that Constitution, with the Supreme Court powers, could have been okay. But with his office and some of his people even entertaining the thought of extending the president's term or giving the possible second term to the president, don't you think it's a little bit too much at this time of his presidency, knowing
Well,
how
definitely.
unpopular this is?
Yeah, definitely. We have so many attempts by all the presidents except his mother in the past about the second term. And all of this failed precisely because the people went against it, and it came to the street actions and so on. And this one is not really that different. Even his own friends and families have spoken about this. And as I said, maybe he's talking about it as a trial balloon, but certainly it won't fly.
Okay, Maria, I'm not sure if you have any opinion on this, but do you think it is appropriate at this point of the president's term to even talk about charter change?
Given my position and the independent nature of my office, I don't think that I should be making a comment on this. Not on air, anyway.
All right, we'll keep that private, Maria. Okay, Mr. Casiple, the New York Times, of course, pointed out that the president should just step down gracefully when his time is up. What about the notion of starting a charter change, maybe extending the term of the president or changing it to a 4-year term, for example, that would not start from him, maybe from the next one? Would that have been a more acceptable proposition?
Well, if it is within the whole concept of revising the Constitution, it's long overdue. We are supposed to review the Constitution every 5 years, and it's more than 25 years already. But every time there's a decision or even talk about it, it always comes down to the political context. Usually, the best time to propose that is in the early in the term of office of a president, and the worst time that you propose this is during the last part of the term, and this is the last part of Mr. Aquino's term.
So what you're trying to say is we cannot trust the president who proposes a charter change at the last part of his term, even if it's meant for long-term good for the country?
I think so, because the problem with changing the Constitution this late in the hour is that everybody wants to have his own agenda taken up. And even if he's personally is not for a second term, which it is incidentally is not true, because he himself said he's open to a second term.
That's right.
That would already open a lot of worms politically.
Okay, thank you very much for your thoughts. Ramon Casiple there is Executive Director of the Institute of Political and Electoral Reform, and Maria Gracia Tan Pulido also joining us, the Chairperson of the Philippine Commission on Audit. That's it for our show tonight. Tomorrow on Between the Lines.
I will not hesitate to take action against ISIL in Syria as well as Iraq. This is a core principle of my presidency.
So the action is going to start. When will the mission be accomplished? We'll have that on Friday here on Between the Lines. You can also watch us online at channelnewsasia.com/video. Thanks for joining me today.